This podcast is proud to be part of the TalkSPORT Fan Network. TalkSPORT. Powered by fans.
Hello, welcome back to this edition of Red Side of the Trent, here to talk about all things Forest. And as Forest did a Forest, this is our second take doing this podcast with our guest, David Jackson from BBC Radio Nottingham. David, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's been an eventful week, I suppose, covering Forest, because since we first recorded this, a lot's happened. Hasn't it? A lot has happened, which is why we've decided to do it again, because I don't think anything we talked about last time is relevant anymore. But that's a week in the life of following Forest, isn't it, really?
We'll fanboy over Elliot Anderson again later in the show. I mean, that will definitely happen, and I will get your picks for European adventures, and I'm sure we can reminisce through what we said at the week. But let's start at the very top then, because we did do this last time, which was more gibbs-white. We wasn't sure if he was staying or going. He stayed. There's been a viral sensation out of this with the Marinakis interview, which we have to touch on because it is it's textbook Forest, honestly. Like, I don't know how this club doesn't have a Netflix or an Amazon Prime documentary on it, because the last 4 years have been gold. Like, let's talk about the deal first of all. You must be thrilled, like everyone else.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when we talked last week, I said to you, didn't I? I said I could see a way in which he might end up staying, and the reason for that was, firstly, that it was taking a while. Secondly, that he'd done his little heart to the fans on the pitch at Chesterfield. The fact that he'd linked up with them in Portugal, and the fact that we heard Nuno was very happy with Morgan Gibbs-White's attitude having returned to training. And I think all of those things combined to say, well, okay, this isn't necessarily a sort of unpleasant behind the scenes breaking of a relationship. So it was possible that it was going to happen. I wouldn't have said, and I didn't believe it was definite or inevitable that this was going to be the conclusion. It could very easily have gone a different way, because, you know, this is a World Cup year for Morgan Gibbs-White. This is his year to try and make sure he can be part of that World Cup next year. And this might end up being the only World Cup he's got a good chance of being in. Who knows what will be happening, 4 or 5 years from now. So I wouldn't have blamed him for wanting to go. I wouldn't have blamed him for going. That said, I think having lost Anthony Elanga, the timing of it was terrible. And I think that's prompted Forest to make sure they did absolutely everything in order to keep him. Spurs obviously thought that they'd triggered the release clause. Whether they'd done everything necessary to actually trigger that release clause, and that's meant that Forest have been able to say, no, you haven't. And therefore we can keep hold of him. And those negotiations obviously have ended up resulting in a new contract for him. I mean, it's great because everything good that Forest do goes through Morgan Gibbs-White is so important to the way they play. And I think it matters on a much bigger scale as well, because there was so much negativity, I think, around the fan base at that point with the idea of losing two such key players. Now to see Forest saying, and in fact, Evangelos Marinakis very clearly saying, we are not here to just have our players picked off. We are moving forward. We are growing as a club, and we are desperate to keep our best players, and we will fight to keep them. I think that message is even more important probably than what Gibbs-White offers on the pitch, which is a huge amount.
I mean, it's funny because of I think the reaction of fans towards him has been, I don't think it's been 50-50. I think it's maybe been like 80-20. I think there have been fans that have gone, no, do you know what, get rid of him if he's not going to be wanting to be here. But I think like the reaction at Chesterfield against Monaco was pretty resounding. I think a lot of people still had his back, sort of thing. What do you think Marinakis maybe said to him that convinced him? Because I think we spoke about it very briefly on the the pod that we previously had recorded, that going to City didn't ever guarantee him game time, and potentially neither did Tottenham, really. So do you think that had an element of play here, as well as an absolutely, obviously, massive pay rise by the sounds of it?
Well, I think, like I said, I mean, the money's one thing, and I guess in some ways money talks. But I think for Morgan Gibbs-White, the main thing is going to be what's going to give him the best chance of playing in that World Cup next year. What's going to get him in that England team? He's so proud to play for England. You can see it. Now, I think there's a few things. One, absolutely, because he's going to play at Forest. Two, they're clearly not going to deal with Spurs, so you might as well write that one off. So where else is there? And if he goes to those clubs, is he going to play? Is he going to get into playing regularly for a Champions League team? Maybe as well, as time's gone on, he's looked at it and maybe he's had assurances, look, we're confident that we're going to end up in the Europa League. It won't be Conference League, and Europa League will hopefully be enough for him if he's going to be playing Premier League and Europa League next year, that maybe he's had assurances that should be enough if he can play as well as he has and compete against some top teams in Europe in that might convince Tuchel further that he can be part of that World Cup squad. So I think all of that combines, and he is, as I said to you before, he is happy at Forest. He does like Forest. He's there. He's a massive part of that team. I think he likes working with Nuno. His relationship with him is very close. It's very good. So I think it was never wanting to get away from Forest. It was just at this crucial point in his career, what's the best move for him? Now, if he did want a move to Spurs, I don't know if that was him driving it or an agent, or if it was the club. I don't, Spurs, I don't know. But whatever it was, if that's not going to happen anyway, if Forest have said, well, we're not going to talk to Spurs, we don't like the way that they've gone about business, that's the end of it, then what choice is left? And he's so happy at Forest that he's not just trying to get away for the sake of getting away. So a new contract, which I assume will mean that Forest don't fall foul of a release clause in the next 12 months, 2 years, then that'll suit, because even if Forest do sell him a year down the line, they'll get an awful lot more than 60 million quid, I'd have thought.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if maybe Marinakis gave him reassurances that reinforcers are coming in, because maybe he looked at Elanga and said, well, he's going, like that's not good, and like he's my mate, sort of thing. And maybe he thought, well, I'm gonna have to go or something. That might have had a play in it. And then obviously Marinakis has flown in. We will talk about this in a moment, but then within 24, 48 hours, it seems like a deal for Dan and Doy is done. But let's talk about Marinakis and the interview on Sky, because it's honestly, it's gone mental. Everyone who's seems to be like an internet sleuth has really looked into this and looked into all the detail and been like, as Marinakis handcuffed Gibbs-White into mentioning him several times in an interview and saying that he's delighted to sign a new contract. I don't know, because Evangelos Marinakis strikes me as a person that he kind of wants to be loved, but he's quite quiet about it at the same time. If that makes sense, I don't know. It's a strange one. I don't know how I'm trying to word this, to be honest, David.
Well, I mean, look, all owners, I think all football owners, question sort of, if you think, why do they do it? Because they're not going to make, generally speaking, they're not going to make money out of it. Marinakis writes off a lot of money all the time. He writes off, he's done it again this summer, writing off millions of pounds all the time. So you do it because you love football, you do it because you love all of that. But also, of course, you want to have something back. I suppose there's kind of that craving adoration. I don't think any football owner is different in that sense. I think, to put yourself into that position, you're not going to do it because you're happy getting stick at all the time, are you really? That it's a very public position to put yourself in, to be running a club that has fans. So of course, I think he does want that. And I thought, I don't think that sets him apart necessarily from anybody else, any other owners. And this certainly will make him popular. But I think it's more about this is from his point of view, is more about the business. And yes, he'll have given him a big pay rise, but if they end up selling him for 100 million next summer, then he'll get more than that money back. So it's a business decision, first and foremost, because he's essential to the team. and everything else really. So, you know, I know there's all those. I've seen a lot of comments about Evangelos Marinakis, and you know, and the fact that Morgan Gibbs-White mentions him so much. But listen, I think he probably mentions him so much because that's got to mean a lot, hasn't it? If your boss was to take time out, take a flight to sit down to talk to you, to offer you a pay rise and tell you how important you are to the business you work for, and he wants you to stay, that's going to make you feel loved and like an essential part of that team, and make you want to stay, isn't it? So I think he is a big part of why he's wanted to stay at Forest, because he has gone to those lengths to make sure that he keeps him. And I think from a footballer's point of view, you look at that and say, yeah, that you know, I want to be part of a club where an owner wants me that much. So I think that it's important in that sense. So no, I don't think he's been forced into it or anything like that. If he wanted to go, I think he'd have gone.
I've seen lots of contrasting opinions online from fans that are saying that he's a disgrace, he's this and that. And then I've seen the opposite, actually, from quite a lot of Man United fans saying that how they admire Marinakis and that he is quite present and he is ruthless and got a bit about him. And then we had another podcast come on, Talking Reds, and Greg Oram from that, he was saying that imagine him and Cloughie together kind of vibes. I mean, that would be, brilliant. And maybe it's like a Nottingham thing, that it's in our blood that we're a bit rebellious, as we are nicknamed the Rebel City. And I just wanted to show you this, David, because this is brilliant. This is why I love AI. This sort of thing can happen. So only audio listeners, it's Marinakis wrestling David Levy and then Gibbs-White in shock in a half and half kit. So I find that brilliant.
Yeah, look, I mean, Evangelos Marinakis is clearly hands-on when he needs to be hands-on, not quite in the way that picture has him hands-on Daniel Levy on the on the canvas of a wrestling ring. But he's hands-on in the sense that he's clearly felt that he is needed to be here to ensure that Morgan Gibbs-White stays. So he's been hands-on very much in that sense. You don't hear that much from him, though. He's not one of those who's doing interviews every week and and coming out with things that will annoy managers. How many times has he done interviews? That one was recorded with the club after the game, but generally, I think on Radio Nottingham we've spoken to him in person probably once or twice. I know Charlie Slater recorded a piece with him when he was over in Greece for a pre-season one time, which was recorded for East Miller today and for us, because he was there kind of on behalf of all of us. But he's not one of those who's kind of constantly out there making headlines. The club makes headlines, but he's not the one out there being interviewed, being quoted all the time like some owners are, and some are. He isn't. But the club absolutely are, making headlines, and I think people see him as a bit of a villain in that sense, and that they sort of like to caricature him in a certain way. But from Forest's point of view, look what he's done. I mean, he's put in that effort to make sure he keeps Morgan Gibbs-White, and he's done it. And and he's sent out a message, a very clear message. I think it's a message of, at the end of the day, we always win. Just get ready for that tweet to be quote tweeted by any fan of any football team that beats Forest throughout next year. Forest fans are going to have to get used to that, I think. But I don't necessarily mind those things. The phrase I just always is a little bit of pantomime. I don't mind it. It's a little bit of fun between supporters, and it's fine. But he sent that message out and said, look, to other clubs, this sends a message. We're not here just to have our players picked. That's what you want, isn't it, as a Forest fan?
Yeah, no, I absolutely love it. And moving on, because we mentioned about a slow transfer market last week, and then this happens. And I feel like this might be the domino effect that starts our transfer window being quite heavy, maybe. And we've already been linked now with Danendoy. Looks like it could be done within the matter of hours, maybe a day or so of recording this. We'll soon find out. I mean, and then Adama Traore from Fulham looks like he could be a potential incoming as well. What do you make of Danendoy, first of all? What you might know of him, David?
Really excited, I think. I mean, he's got some pace. He can use both feet. He can play on the right and left. He can score a few goals. Obviously, some good teams were after him as well. So in terms of a sort of an immediate replacement for Anthony Elanga, it seems to fit. It seems to fit in the same style that Forest have played before. I did wonder when they lost Elanga. I had a conversation with Colin about whether we might see Forest have to adapt their style, as to whether they'd be able to find somebody who could be in that same mould as Elanga, and whether they might have to change things around a little bit, mix things up and change the style. But the fact that they've gone for Ndoye makes me think that he can carry the ball. He can carry the ball at some pace as well. That makes me think that they want to keep that, especially now they've kept Gibbs-White. You think, yeah, actually, they'll be probably, in terms of style, probably a continuation from last year. I like it. I like the fact that, yeah, they've got a lot of money in, or, you know, for Anthony Elanga, probably in terms of PSR doesn't represent an enormous profit, but they've gone and spent probably what that profit is on Ndoye, and that shows ambition. I think there's a player, like I say, top teams, and you know, Napoli reportedly interested in him, and you know, scored goals, big competitions, you know, big games. It's difficult to dislike that as a signing, isn't it? I think that's really exciting. And then you combine that with Traore, who is clearly going to be a Nuno signing because he knows him well from Wolves. And there's somebody again with pace and strength. And yes, he can be inconsistent. I've seen him play some games where you don't see a lot from him, and then you see other games like down at Craven Cottage against Forest last season, where he was absolutely unstoppable. You know, the pace at which he took on Nico Williams a few times, who's no slouch himself, was just devastating to watch. He was brilliant that day. So Nuno clearly feels he can get the best out of him. And the idea of adding those two into the team this week, having kept Morgan Gibbs-White, I think just would completely lift the mood from where it was for many supporters 7 days ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ndoye looks quite a clever player. I look at him and I look at Elanga and think that he's technically better on the ball. Maybe not as quick like Elanga is off the mark, where he can get to 0 to 100 in no matter of time at all. I just think Ndoye offers maybe a little bit more dynamism to our play. Maybe we can be a bit more clever, like keep the ball a little bit more and make teams think what we're going to do, rather than we just counter attack all the time. Maybe that gives us a little different edge. And then Traore is just one of them where you can bring him off the bench with 20 minutes to go when legs are tired, and we need someone as an outlet, can't we? And he can play down the centre, he can play out wide either side as well, which I think is a clever business personally. He's someone with a lot of experience as well at 29 only. It seems like he's been around forever.
Yeah, it does. I agree. Yeah. You know, I remember him and remember George Ellakobi when Forest signed him. He was another great big kind of stacked kind of player who was at Wolves at the time as well. But Traore is one of those. I agree with you. I think back to the Liverpool away game last year when they kind of packed in midfield, and then you need somebody to come on for half an hour with that pace, as Forest did with Elanga and Hudson-Odoi. And if you've got Traore as an option on the bench, I think that's always going to worry opposition defenders, isn't it? If you like you said, if they've had to try and deal with Ndoye and Hudson-Odoi, which is going to be a mouthful for Colin to try and get used to next year, and then at the end of, like you said, after 60, 70 minutes, suddenly Traore comes on, I think that would be pretty frightening for opposition defenders. I mean, you know, we'll see with Traore what happens, but it seems to make sense, doesn't it? It seems to make sense where Forest have, you know, lost players like Sosa, and you know they're going to need that real strength in depth in those positions. I can imagine that one happening. It seems to fit.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you anchor into my next question for you, which is talking about last season. I mean, the dust has settled now, and we missed out in Champions League because our home form dipped because of how teams figured out how we play, basically, and figured that if we give Forest the ball, then we can't really do anything. But now that's all settled, and we are potentially going to get into the Europa League. It's obviously just come out that we won't know until the 11th of August now, which is absolutely mental because that is the week commencing of the first week of the season. This is football, which is very strange, UEFA. last season was a lot of fun though, wasn't it, David? Going up and down the country and beating teams and winning football matches, wasn't it?
Yeah, especially as, away days had become pretty tiresome for 2 years, hadn't they? You sort of went to away games for a long time, pretty much assuming that you would get very little from those. There were very few, weren't there? I mean, Southampton away in that first season. It was only really at the end of the second season when they got those wins at Sheffield United and Burnley. Although they were obviously two teams going down. So you thought, well, how good are Forest going to be on the road? And then suddenly the next season, lo and behold, within a few months, beating Liverpool, beat Manchester United, scored 3 goals at Old Trafford for the first time since the mid-80s, constantly having us guys back at base while we're presenting and commentating at the ground. You've got a couple of guys back at base, Deke and Chris, who are big on their stats, who are just suddenly scouring the internet to try and find every stat. I didn't know we'd have to search for the last time Forest scored 3 at Manchester United, or and sort of messaging us with all these stats. And it's been great. It was a lot of fun, wasn't it? And it was a lot of fun as well, even when you went down to the training ground to record interviews with players. The whole mood around was always just fun, light-hearted play. It was a good club to be involved in. You were always happy to go down and chat, because there was just a really nice sort of chilled out vibe. I'd say especially kind of around the middle third of the season, where there was that realization that, this absolute definite realization, this isn't going to be a struggle of a season. This is a good season. It's a good season and could become a great season. And at that point, it was just, of course, at the end, then it's a little bit more, what's going to happen? And everyone, even the journalists, are a bit like, what's going to happen? But it was just a lot of fun to report on, a lot of fun to be there to watch. And also, I think we needed it, didn't we? After 2 years of fighting at the bottom end of the table, to actually just have that joy. And I've been saying to people for a while, ex-players and stuff, when I kind of gone down and recorded interviews, and I said, look, you look at the teams who've played in Europe, Forest, it's not ridiculous to suggest that Forest could, within the next few years, get back into Europe. It's here. And there's been a lot of eye rolling from people, just kind of going, come on, this is just about staying up, and, let's just stay up. And I thought, well, I don't see why. Look at the list of teams who've played in Europe in the last 25 years. And Forest aren't out of place in that. So I've always thought that they would get back. I didn't expect it immediately after a season of fighting against relegation to pretty much, double the points tally and all that kind of thing. I didn't expect it then, but I think, I'd always been sort of banging the drum for, this is something we should be expecting to happen in a few years. Evangelos Marinakis has got experience of doing it with Olympiacos year after year. He was never going to settle for owning a club that finished 15th and 16th every season. He was always going to be wanting to put the money in and to drive the club to be in Europe. Otherwise, he wouldn't be there. So I always thought it'd happen. I didn't expect it to happen quite so quickly and in quite such joyous fashion. I think the way Forest played, annoying teams, but just the quick breakaway, not playing boring football. Yes, solid defensively, but never boring. And that constant threat, that constant feeling that they could just win the ball and break at such pace at any time. It's great to watch, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was at Liverpool away, and me and Reese, who does the pod with me, we tuned into the BBC Sounds app and put on, tried to get Colin on straight away. I think it was just to rewind it. So because we like listening to the end of it, and I mean the commentary that he came out with, obviously the first time we'd beaten Liverpool at Anfield in 55 years, Barry Lyons and Matt Gillies being the manager. Barry Lyons with 2 goals there. I mean, that's a bit audacious to write that down, surely. Book. Like, has he had that in the last 3 seasons then? In his book?
Yeah, look, Colin does a lot of prep for games, and he'll often turn to me on a Friday despairing at the stats that Forest are facing this week, and he'll say, He said, look how much this Manchester City team cost compared to the way, he's sat there and he's compared all the numbers. Or he'll say, look, the last time Forest went there and won, look at this. Look how many times the place is. What do you think the record is since then? How many times do you think they played? How many goals do you think Forest have scored? And I go, I don't know, Colin. And he's sort of despairing. So he's kind of written it all and he's prepared it all and he's ready. But don't forget, Colin was commentating on Forest, through the 90s as well when Forest were in the Premier League or whatever. So those names are probably ingrained on his brain that he's been, ready to kind of bring out for when it mattered. And he just kept looking at me at the end of the game, I remember, because without meaning to blow my own trumpet, whilst also meaning to blow my own trumpet, I had sort of called it on the way and said I sort of fancied Forest today and I fancied Hudson-Odoi. And Steve Hodge and Colin both just kind of laughed at me and told me to get back in my box. And then when it happened, I was very, very pleased indeed. But Colin just kept looking at me in the last few minutes. As we got to like 89 minutes and 90 minutes, he just kept looking over at me and shrugging while he was commentating. Going, what's going on in front of us? This is going to happen, isn't it? I'm like, I think it is actually going to happen, yeah, because while I'd said the words, it still seemed a little bit unbelievable. And it was just so much fun that day.
The amount of recognition we got off Arne Slot for like the next several weeks, he couldn't stop mentioning it. Joe, for the reverse fixture, you guys in the commentary team must have been so aware of the crowd singing the Zombie song Joe by the Cranberries at him. It's surely you all turn to each other and just like think this is hilarious, but to remain professional, obviously, and not even mention it. There's zero mention of it.
There are some chants you can mention. There are some that you can sort of talk around while you're on the radio, I suppose. Even just the Forest fans singing about going for a drink with Nuno. You can't quite go into detail when you're broadcasting on the BBC about exactly what's being said. So you're right. But yeah, I just enjoyed all that. The amount of times that you could tell Arne Slot was sort of confused as to how he'd lost to Forest. I think he was baffled. I don't think he ever quite worked out what had happened that day. I think he was, I remember him saying something like, this doesn't happen. You shouldn't be losing to a team that's probably going to finish in the lower half of the table. This doesn't happen. It's like, well, it can in England, actually. The Premier League, you look at the FA Cup, it can happen where a top two can lose to a team 2, 3, 4 divisions below. It does happen. There's a lot of strength and depth in England. And actually, in the Premier League, it's like, look at Forest. You look at the teams who they've been unable to beat, having got up to the Premier League, aren't the Liverpools and Manchester Cities. It's some of the middling teams who, for some reason, you just struggle to get past. How many times do they seem to struggle away, against Brentford and Bournemouth in those sides? You just think it's those teams. Sometimes it can just happen. And Forest beat them with a tactical masterclass from Nuno. And I wish they'd beaten them at home as well. But to not be beaten by them in an incredible year when they won the league at a canter, that's something else to be proud of. It's one of the many things from last season.
I think that Chris Wood goal at home was possibly one of the loudest I've been part of. The roar was ridiculous, and I think it was just because we really wanted to beat him. And if we had beaten him, we'd have been only like so many, like maybe a couple of points, if not a point behind him in the league. We'd have gone second, and like you're in fairy dust land almost then. Yeah. So I've got a question for you. I've just come off the top of my head. If there was a goal, and I might know the answer, if there was a goal from this season just gone where Colin Fray or Steve Hodge could have swore and it'd been quite okay, like the BBC would have gone, yeah, that's fine, you get one a year. Like, is there one that comes to mind?
Oh, that is
Hodge's yes could definitely be a little F word or something. I think I remember vaguely David Johnson doing it a few years ago, or someone like that doing it years ago, and I don't think they ever come back on, to be honest.
Yeah, David Johnson did do a game for us, didn't he? Was it away at? I feel like it might have been at Millwall.
I don't know, but I'm pretty sure he said
he did do a game.
And like,
did he?
Like, I'm pretty sure he did. Yeah. If Hodgie could swear, Colin could swear.
Those little moments of like the sort of cheering and the shouting over the commentary. I suppose they're a little bit. Some people might like them, some people don't. My favourite of those this year, I will get to your answer in a minute, but my favourite of those, I think, was Brian Laws just laughing as Ryan Yates ran away at Brighton after scoring the winning penalty, and then just shouting, "Just get in, Yatesy!" He was enjoying it so much. And then he said the line, "If he doesn't get in the Trent now, I'll throw him in myself." And he was so into that moment. And it'd been quite a long day, that game. It'd been a long time coming. And then just suddenly there was that moment from that penalty shootout was brilliant. It's a really good question, that, about the goal from last year. I'm trying to think of the relief of scoring away at West Ham at the end of the season, because it was a little bit feeling like, if Forest mess up here, you don't want to be going into the last days, it's going to fall apart. So I think the West Ham one, and I think if it wasn't a goal, I think it would be the full-time whistle at Liverpool, because both of them, their eyes were just so wide. Steve Hodges played in those games. His first goals were at Liverpool. He scored 2, I think. They lost 4-2 in the early 80s. So, he's got history of big games against Liverpool, not just that one, but obviously many more. So I think for both of them, I think probably the relief at West Ham and just the shock at Liverpool, I think.
Brilliant. I mean, what would you say last season, where there was a turning point in the season where you thought it might just happen? Obviously, we all know what was that, but there must have been a point where, especially in that run in December to January, we had a really tricky run, and we just kept beating teams ridiculously.
I remember there's a few, obviously. I mean, beating Spurs on Boxing Day, just 1-0. As soon as it was at that time where you score and you just think, we're not going to concede, we're fine. And I remember going to Wolves and thinking, I'm just quite relaxed here. I think Forest will go here. Forest will win. They'll keep a clean sheet, and on we'll go to the next one. And it was the first time, really, I think I'd allowed myself to actually almost relax into sort of getting used to that. It just felt, this is what we'll do. And although Wolves had their chances, I know, and Matt Sells made some saves, I felt relaxed watching that game. They scored early on. That felt inevitable that Morgan Gibbs-White would score. They get another one. Taiwo comes off the bench and scores, and it just the whole. I don't know. It just all. For me, that night just felt like a symbol of Forest are now, or this season, Forest are above the teams fighting at the bottom end of the table, because Wolves have been on a sort of had a little bit of a turnaround under a new manager at that point, but it just didn't seem to make any difference. Forest just went there, did exactly what they've been doing in previous games, and Sells, who was outstanding all season. When people say, "Oh yeah, you did all right, but you relied on your goalkeeper," your goalkeeper's one of your team. You're allowed to rely on him. That's okay. He's part of the team. So he was outstanding that night, yes, but I felt relaxed. That game just said to me, Forest are not the team they were last year. We can go away from home here and feel pretty confident in Forest going and getting 3 points and keeping a clean sheet. So that game stood out a bit for me. I remember just going back to the car and went, Forest are just doing what they do, which is amazing, isn't it? Because a year before that, we didn't really have away days like that. But then suddenly for that game, it was like, I turned up thinking they'd win and keep a clean sheet. They've done that, and I've gone home and gone, that's of course that's what happened, because that's just what Forest do.
I think just one point on Matt Sells, I think it's a sign of a good goalkeeper if he wins you just over 10 points a season. I think you could argue that's what he potentially did, if not more. So,
Brian Clough used to say the same, didn't he? Which is why he was happy to go and splash loads of money on Peter Shilton. I don't think goalkeepers were necessarily regarded much before that as being that essential to your team. They were just somebody you had in goal. But he said, no, that's how important it is. You spend that money. It was $250,000 on Peter Shilton, and obviously made that famous save away at Coventry, and obviously many, many more as well. But that's what helped them become the success that they were. So I agree. Forest have absolutely landed on the feet with Sells. What a signing. I don't think anybody expected him to have the extreme impact that he has been absolutely phenomenal. What a find.
I know, yeah. To say he was like 6th or 7th choice in January when we was really struggling to get a goalkeeper in that we could just rely on and have some stability there, and the defense kind of relax of the person behind him. So no, I'm chuffed a bit. So I'm glad he's signed another deal, which has probably bumped his wages up, and maybe hopefully get like an option to extend that, because I know it's not extended in years as such. So no, that's good. The funny thing about the Wolves thing, I've got a weird thing that if we beat a team, I love to seek out like support other team supporters, like little vlogs, fan channels, things. And there's a girl who, obviously in the home end there, when Gibbs-White's charging forward and he's popped that one in, and she's like, you just knew it was going to be him, and he's obviously put his ear and fingers in his ears, and they're just all giving they're letting hell let loose on him, sort of thing.
Yeah, it was how slowly he went to the fans and how slowly he put his fingers in his ears for that one, that he was enjoying every second of it, wasn't he? And I was thinking, when it seemed like he might be on his way, I thought, would he, if he scored against Forest, would he do that? Would he do that? I don't think he would. Surely he wouldn't have done. Surely.
I'd like to think he wouldn't, because we've treated him pretty much like the king around here.
It's a very different relationship with him and Forest fans than him and Wolves. I completely agree with you. But you see, I'm kind of all for, by the way, I'm all for players celebrating goals, whoever they play against, all this kind of, oh no, I'm not going to celebrate, I'm just being respectful to my ex-employers. Okay, I get it. But I also just think, come on, it's football. Like, you work your entire career to score a goal. When you have that moment, enjoy it, and, be the pantomime villain. Just enjoy. So I sort of wouldn't mind it, but at the same time, I don't think he'd have done it against Forest. I don't think so.
I'm still disappointed that Chris Wood didn't give it the big one in front of the Gallagate.
Yeah,
the season.
The thing is, he's played for everybody else, so it makes it difficult for him to ever celebrate a goal, doesn't it? He scores against Leicester, and he was there.
Brighton.
Everybody, Brighton, Birmingham, you name it, he's been there. It seems.
Yeah, definitely. Just move on to this coming season and maybe think about it from a tactical nerd point of view, as I like to do. How do you see the team approaching this season? Obviously, because of the loss of that pace of Elanga, but the potential of Ndoye, which is going to come in, and Traore. Do you think Forest will resume to play counter-attack football? Do you see a change happening because of what happened towards the end of last season?
Well, I think Forest are so effective when they attack with pace that I don't know why you would lose that, really. That I think that they work hard as a team. I think, that they are good defensively. They're great positionally. They're very disciplined and structured in how they defend. So I think they've got that going really well for them. So I don't know why you would change that element too much. I think when you've then got Morgan Gibbs-White, who is just expert at turning defence into attack and being able to find that pass, and when you've got some pace on the wings from, hopefully, Ndoye and then Traore, if you've got all of those elements, I don't know why you'd bother trying to change it too much, because as much as you mentioned earlier, teams maybe figured Forest out, that maybe some teams had found a new way of playing against Forest. I think that's true. But there were also other elements that hindered Forest at the end of last season, where they just didn't have maybe a depth that they needed. They had a few players playing through injuries. They had a few players who, ideally you would have rested, but they just couldn't really afford to. And maybe an element of that inexperience to some players in getting over the line in that kind of thing, whereas other teams like Man City just came into the road to be able to get themselves over the line, and Chelsea the same. And maybe that was a bit lacking in Forest. I don't know. So I think there were a few factors, but I think you've just got to play to your strengths. If you look at what Forest have got, it'd be really interesting if Igor Jesus is chosen as the number 9 instead of Chris Wood, and what that means, whether that means there are different things you can do to play through him that maybe they wouldn't have done with Chris Wood. That might change things a little bit, but I think it's probably, we'll see, but I'm anticipating more tweaking than any kind of revolution in terms of style. They might want to increase the amount of possession they have in games, but I mean, it worked for them. So I don't think they necessarily need to. I think the way that they played before, they were in control of games when they didn't have possession of it. And they were just waiting for that moment. And once they got it, they were devastating. So I can't see Nuno massively changing that, really. What will be interesting, I suppose, is if during European games there is a change to the 11, whether we might have to start seeing other players, that starting 11 mixing around a bit, because he likes to have his set 11, but I don't know whether he'll be able to do that all this season. So whether he will have to start rotating a bit, and Chris Wood 1 week and Igor Jesus maybe then coming in for a couple and changing it around, or say with the wingers in all positions, really, probably not so much defensively or in goal, but he might want to start mixing that around more so. That we'll see, and that might impact on how they play. And maybe it'll be a bit of horses for courses as well, of determining, well, in this game we'll play these players, which has happened anyway last year, to be fair. You knew it when a game was for Ryan Yates or Nico Dominguez, or at the end when he's put Sangare into play and some sort of fresh legs and mix it up a bit in that way. So it does happen anyway, I guess, but it might have to happen more. So no, I don't think I see a massive change in style, and I don't think I'd want to, really. We'll see who else they sign. That might change things. A lot of other names being linked to might mix things up a bit for Forest if there's truth in them, and we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Sangare seemingly continuing his form from the end of last season into pre-season, it could be that we do change that little bit of being more possession and kind of him being the quarterback sort of player from central midfield, because he has got that passing range in his locker. I think he's got it a bit more than Nico Dominguez, Yates, or Anderson for that matter of fact. So just maybe that's what Nuno wants to do, and surround him with more legs, because that's always been sort of his Achilles heel by the looks of it. Although he looks incredibly sharp this season. Just touching on Europe, obviously I mentioned the Crystal Palace thing and the hearing going till the new season is going to start pretty much. How annoying is that from a commentary and a radio point of view, because you're not going to know which way you're going, and Colin's going to be looking on Sky Scanner for all sorts of deals and not knowing whether he's going to I don't know, I can't name teams in the Conference League, probably like Faroe Islands or going to places like Italy or Porto.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, yes, and you're absolutely right. Colin does do the admin, and
I always do it.
He loves it. He loves to hate it, shall we say? I always think he'll sort of come in and go, "I've got a load of admin to sort," and I thought, I don't think you're as unhappy about that as you're making out, because he does have to deal with a heck of a lot, Colin, because I don't do it, so he has to sort it all out. So yeah, in terms of those flights, you're looking. Yeah, the draw's going to be made, and we're not going to know if they're in that competition or whether we're waiting for Europa League. And you're going to be talking potentially a week or so before the first game as to which team, Forest or Palace or Lyon, are going to be, who knows, are going to be playing in that game. And that it's not helpful. It's not helpful for anybody, is it, to not. No, I don't know how clubs are going to be able to, get themselves sorted and get the stadium sorted to host a lot of people at such short notice for a European fixture. I guess they'll just have to put all plans in place for all games. All the clubs will, just in case, I guess. But, in terms of hosting a match, if that game is at home, you're talking about letting police know and all of that kind of thing. There's a lot to putting on a football match, getting stewards ready who can come in and work, staffing, all of those sort of things. So if you've got a home game, that short notice, that's going to be really hard for clubs to organise, I think. Put everything in place just in case. And yeah, same for fans who are thinking that they want to go. Do you book flights to, wherever, the Azores? If it's there, then on the off chance, just book them anyway. I think I've never been. It looks amazing. Do you do that just on the off chance that Forest actually end up in that competition? I don't know. It's a situation we've never known before.
with all the evidence out there, though, I can't personally see Crystal Palace getting their way. I just think it's if you're going to go by what I know, it's the Premier League and UEFA, so they're different governing bodies, but if you're going off what the Premier League did with us in a points deduction, where they said, well, you might have maximised your profits and got the most money you could for Brennan Johnson, but you missed the deadline and they're the rules regardless. So surely this will apply to UEFA, and they've already kicked teams out already. Surely they're not going to just turn back round because it's Crystal Palace and they've put a little bit of pressure on. They've sent ultras have gone to there to intimidate receptionists and all sorts. And Steve Parish has been on X, Y, and Z podcast saying I missed an email. I feel like that's just tough luck. That's your own fault.
Yeah, I mean, there is the part of me that has sympathy with the idea that I always want football to be decided by who the best team was. And, you know, it would be hypocritical of me to say anything else, because that's what I was saying when Forest had that 4-point deduction. And you were like, well, you know, teams having points deduction for stuff that happens off the field, I get it. If there's been a sporting advantage to that, fine. And, you know, Forest didn't really. They had Brennan Johnson for 2 or 3 games more. Didn't really make much of a difference. And the whole point of PSR rules is to make clubs sustainable. And so the spirit of that didn't feel right then, that Forest get punished for actually doing what they're trying to encourage clubs to do. So in that, I was sort of looking at that thinking, well, there's something wrong with the rules then. Surely the Premier League need to look at those rules and say, hang on a minute, if what we're doing inadvertently is punishing teams for doing exactly what we want them to do, then maybe we need to look at them. But the black and white facts are, you know the rules at the start. If you break the rules, then you get a punishment. And that is what happened to Forest. So I agree with you. Same with Palace. They might be able to come and say, well, look, it was just an admin error. And this club's waited all this time for this competition. Don't take it away from them. And look at the fans and, you know, please. And I get all of that. And I have absolute sympathy for the players who've worked so hard and had that great day at Wembley to beat City in the cup final and then think, great, we're going to be in the Europa League. Isn't this amazing? And I feel sorry for those fans who've been looking at the Europa League all summer thinking, are we going to get to play these teams and have that taken away from them? I do. I have sympathy. I have a lot of sympathy for them. But at the end of it, if you go to CAS and they say, if they do look at the facts and just say, well, they're the rules, you didn't meet the rules, that it's difficult to see how they can go, oh, well, okay, we'll just, you know, we feel sorry for you, therefore you can be in it. That surely can't happen. So the only way I can see them getting out of it is if there is other evidence that we don't know about that comes out and says, actually, Palace didn't do anything wrong, or Palace were misled by this, or Palace had been told this by somebody in UEFA. If there's some evidence like that, then they would have more of a chance. If they're fighting more on the spirit of it than the facts of it, like Forest were, then it's difficult to see how a different conclusion will be brought by CAS than it was by UEFA. So I would imagine if no more evidence comes out, I'd agree with you. I think at the moment it seems most likely that Forest will probably end up in the Europa League, but we don't know what's going to be said. You know, they've had time to prepare an appeal. They've obviously decided to appeal because they feel they've got a good case.
Yeah, I mean, can't wait to see the draw on August the 4th and they bring out their A4 bit of paper out of the bowl with both our names on it, because they don't know. And then obviously when they do the draw for I don't know when they do the draw for the group stage of the Europa League, so that's probably irrelevant. But just taking it into this season again, who was a player last season that surprised you and is now going to carry that bit of extra weight because the expectation has now gone up that little bit higher?
You know what I'm going to say here, don't you? I think you're happy about me saying it as well, aren't you? Yes. I mean, Elliot Anderson is the one who, for me, just right from the start, I mean, I knew he'd be good. I just think he's benefited so much from, maybe it is being away from Newcastle, his boyhood club, where he was, you know, popular and a fan as well, and it's so important up there to just be away from all of that and just sort of be a footballer as his job, if you like, and at a club, and focus on doing his job in Forest and with the manager who's investing his time in him. And I think, not that Eddie Howe didn't, but I just think that environment he's got at Forest and around the other young players that he's got in that team, I think he's benefited so much, and he's come on so much. He's so busy. The miles he must run during a game, the amount of challenges that he wins, top few players in the Premier League for that. He just wins those duels and quickly manages to find an accurate pass as well to get Forest moving. So many of their attacks were started by Elliot Anderson winning the ball. And I like him a lot. I really, really enjoy watching him play. He's, I think it's easy to say he does a lot of things that people don't see, but I think Forest fans do see it. I think Forest fans do appreciate it. And I think people are a bit more adept these days than maybe 20, 30 years ago about what midfielders do and those type of midfielders. And I think Forest fans enjoy that about him. He's busy, he's lively, he's accurate in his tackling as well. He's not wild. He'll tackle well, a bit like Ola Aina. I love watching Ola Aina tackle as well, because he stands his ground and then just puts his foot in and manages to bring it away and does something sensible with it. So I think Anderson for that, and I can see him going on to have another good year. He's a hard-working, focused, driven footballer, and I can see him just getting better and better.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely adore him. I just think he's a midfielder that can do pretty much everything. He can tackle.
Needs to score more.
He needs to score more.
The one thing, and I think he probably knows that. In order to, I don't think it's that scoring goals will get him a senior England call up, because I think England coaches and scouts and the manager can see more about what they do. But there's just something about getting that momentum behind you when you're also scoring a load of goals. If he can contribute some goals as well, which he's capable of. I think it was when we spoke to Elliot Anderson about the goal he scored at Southampton, I'm sure he said it was Matt Sells, I think, who'd said to him, "You should shoot more.
Yeah,
you should shoot more. You make this difficult for me in training. You should shoot more." So he did, and he scored. It's like, well, do it more. He's got to get into those positions, and he's more about the team and making sure that he does the right things, and he's so focused on that. He's not a selfish player, and you wouldn't want him to turn into a selfish player. But I would just like to see him getting the rewards in terms of goals. And I think then what would happen is you'll start to get maybe a bit more of a groundswell of opinion, of appreciation, even from outside Nottingham, as to what he's doing. And maybe that does then impact on chances of him playing internationally.
Yeah. I think if Forest do go with a little bit of a different tactic and formation and approach to games where Sangare sits and you've got Morgan and Elliott driving and being those box-to-box midfielders, we did see that a little bit last season. Maybe that's how Anderson gets into those positions a bit more to score. I mean, he's got great technique, so I don't see why he shouldn't score more goals. It's just obviously hitting the target a little bit more often. But I absolutely love him. I mean, there was a great moment last season against Leicester where Nico Williams has played him a short pass and he just absolutely wipes out El Canouse, I think it is, just straight over his back like a hockey kind of check, and then he bollocks Nico Williams for a bad pass. So yeah, it's great, and I think that position next to Declan Rice for England is a battle between him and Adam Wharton. Personally, I just think they're two of the best central midfielders I've seen for a long time in England that know how to dictate play and know when to go and when to stop. And I just think they're both very talented players in their own right, and I look forward to seeing both of them. And I think both of them should go personally to the World Cup. I think I don't see why not.
Yeah, well, when Thomas Tuchel was asked about, he wasn't asked about Elliot Anderson at the press conference a couple of months ago. He was asked about somebody else, but he brought up Elliot Anderson's name and just said, and I thought that was interesting that he brought up a few names. To be fair, it wasn't just Elliot Anderson, but he just said, look, he's going to be away with the under-21s who want him to go and be an important part of that. We've got another year, but I thought interesting that he's raised him. So he's clearly on his radar. And I'm not surprised he will be on the radar of every top team in the Premier League. Elliot Anderson, because he's been that good for Forest last year. He's been really, really important in what they've done. So make no mistake, there will be top Premier League clubs monitoring him very closely and seeing everything he's been doing well. And, that might be something they have to watch out for in future as well, is any sort of serious interest in him. But he's only been there a bit at Forest, and he's growing and he's developing. And I see him playing for England before the end of the season, and I wouldn't be surprised, like you, to see him in the squad for the World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, he ran the show for England in the under 21s as well. I know Harvey Elliott won Player of the Tournament, but it's the same as last time when they won it. Morgan Gibbs-white was way better than Anthony Gordon, and he won it. But we'll do some fun things to round it off, and you know what's coming, so it's fine.
Yeah.
The Europa League pots.
Okay.
We need a team from each one. Where you'd like to go. I already know the score, but we need to do it again, David.
No, I'm happy. So it's just nice to look at it, isn't it? So this is the Europa League pots. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So in one, there are 2 there. I mean, there's lots there, isn't there? I mean, it's never going to be unpleasant to go to, Salzburg or something like that. But I think, or Porto. But I Rangers would be a lot of fun. But I mean, you've got to say Roma from pot 1, haven't you? The idea of going to Roma and commentating on a football match at Roma, that's too exciting. I think as well, when Forest were last in Europe in the mid-90s, they didn't get an Italian team. So I think the idea of getting out to Italy would be amazing.
Yeah, great.
So pot 2. Lyon would be a bit of a reunion, wouldn't it? If they're there for, quite a few of the players. So let's see. From there, I think Basel might be nice, Yeah. I think Basel might be good. We've seen Basel on the telly quite a bit in the last year for one reason or another. So a little trip to Switzerland. Was it Eurovision held in Basel? My kids love that, so they've been watching that, and then the Euros. Basel would be all right. I think I wouldn't say no to that. Pot 3, Midtjylland. Depending on the time of year, that could be a bit chilly, but it's got to be Anderlecht from there. And I think Steve Hodge will be phoning us straight away to make sure he is on the flight to Anderlecht with us, having scored the 2 goals in the first leg of the UEFA Cup semi-final in '84 before Forest were cheated out of the second leg, as came to light after that. I think he would quite enjoy going back to there and seeing Forest beat them. So I need to pick one from pot 4. It's Panathinaikos, isn't it?
Yeah, for the pantomime, isn't it?
I think so. I think you've got to. Yeah, I think so. I think that's going to be the one that's the one that stands out, surely.
Nah, young boys, Wankdorf. I told you this, David.
You did. just to put Colin in a difficult position when he's commentating.
Do you think he would have to ask the BBC whether he can actually say that?
I mean, if it's the name, it's the name. What can you do?
It's unbelievable that. Like, honestly, what? It's all a big innuendo. Young boys, Wankdorf, terrible. Oh my goodness, I'm going to get cancelled now. Last thing, but no means least, it's a red hot take for the new season, David. We do this now as we've stolen it off Chris Elmer from Forest All Over. He won't mind. I will let him know that you've been part of this. He will listen anyway. But I think you remember. I remember you having 2 last time, but maybe one of them might get ruled out now.
Yeah. Well, we've mentioned Anderson, haven't we? Anyway, as kind of being part of that World Cup squad next year, I suppose. But I just think Murillo at some point one's gonna fly in. Now, either that will be, sort of running through, taking everyone on, like in that training shot that Forrest put out not that long ago when he kind of danced through and chipped it past the goalkeeper. But I rather fancy him to score at some point from his own half. He was close to Spurs. He was close at Luton that time. At some point, I'll say at least 40 yards, probably in his own half. At some point, Murillo's going to just smash one from that far out, and it's going to go in. So I'm going to go Murillo from his own half to score this season.
Got to be. It's funny because he didn't really get mentioned that much last season, and he had another outstanding season, really, next to Nikola Milenkovic. And I think because Milenkovic came in and was the new boy on the block, I guess, he stole quite a lot of the limelight. And then you got, obviously, the old boy in Chris Wood. I mean, he's not old, really, but he is the old boy of the team, scoring all the goals. So, like, Murillo just went completely under the radar. I mean, he's someone that I would have thought we'd lose this season because he was just how good he is. Like, how can you be that big but that agile?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a good point. But he, he also played for Brazil last year.
Yeah, unbelievable.
We're talking about a Forest player actually, playing for Brazil against Argentina. A bit of a nightmare match for him to have to be involved in, wasn't it? Nothing really went right for the whole team in that game. But I hope he gets more opportunities off the back of that. If Forest can have another good year this year, and if he can have another good year, clearly they like him, clearly they're monitoring him. So, you would think that there's a good chance that he'll get picked again. I mean, they'll have to be watching Forest a lot because, half their team potentially are at Forest now with Igor Jesus, and who knows who else they might end up signing and see them linked, however strongly, I don't know, with Douglas Luiz, but, they'll be watching, they'll be watching us quite a lot, I suspect, next season, because half the Brazil team might end up being Forest by the time the World Cup comes around. Imagine that.
I'm excited to see Igor because he's been Brazil's number 9 in the last
a few games.
And he scored. Very exciting to have him on board. He looked good against Fulham from what I've seen as well. So excited to see what he can do as well.
He did. He scored a good goal for Botafogo, didn't he, against PSG in the summer? And he's had I think he's had a bit of a strange career where he's kind of moved away and then gone back to Brazil. Kind of played in the Middle East, I think, didn't he? And then kind of moved back to Brazil, and just suddenly in the last season has just caught everyone's eye. And from all reports that you would trust from there, he's been brilliant in all aspects of his game and fully deserved his Brazil call-up. So I think it's going to be really exciting to see him when we get to see him.
Yeah, we spoke to a Brazilian journalist. He said he went to Saudi or the Middle East, to just make money. That was literally, he even admitted that. And I know he was chased by Arsenal whilst Edu was there. Coincidence that Edu comes here, we snag him. So no, it's great. What's the Shut Up and Show More football podcast got coming, David?
Oh well, the one that's currently out has a conversation with Zach Abbott, who I just always love talking to. I went down and spoke to him halfway through last season, and I'd never spoken to him before, and he just amazed me with, he's such a young lad and able to just speak so well. He's great. I really like him as a player, but also just as a person. I remember talking to Nuno about him. We're on our way from the sort of press conference area, and then we walk through. Colin does this most week, but I do it sometimes. We walk through to wherever we're going to record the one-to-one interview that we do with Nuno, and so that's just a little walk down a corridor and then down into one of the changing rooms or one of the rooms down there. And on the way down, I said, "Oh, I spoke to Zach Abbott yesterday," and his face sort of lit up, and he just started telling me how highly he thinks of him because he's he said, you look at his approach. If he has a disappointment, he just wants to learn from it. He said, you look at Ryan Yates, he gets a disappointment, he learns from it, he makes sure he's better next time. And Zach Abbott was talking about how he very much looks at Ryan Yates in many ways to learn from, in terms of positionally Milenkovic, but in terms of, character, he looks at Ryan Yates and says, yeah, look, how to deal with disappointment, with losing your place, how to deal with all of that. Just look at Ryan Yates, because he's incredible for that, and his attitude is phenomenal. Ryan Yates. So if Zach Abbott's going to follow in his footsteps, then I think he will. I think he'll be in the team before too long. Then I think there's another really good homegrown player there to enjoy watching. And so, anyway, so I spoke to him from Portugal on the podcast. I lost track of what we're doing. I'm meant to be plugging things, aren't I? Sorry. So Zach's on the podcast. We had a chat while he was over in Portugal, and we had a bit of a chat about kind of how things are going and that sort of thing. So, yeah, you can catch that. The artwork's changed a little bit on our podcast. I didn't know, but it has been changed and it looks very good. These things are done by people other than me. So it used to be yellow, but it's gone red now. So if you look at it, it is that same one, but it's there, which is on, all platforms, I think, but on BBC Sounds as well, which you can find.
Great. Now I'm looking forward to seeing what Zach's progression will be like this season, whether that he gets to play in a 2 or a 3, which could well be a possibility. So no, really looking forward to it. Looking forward to listening to the podcast throughout the season. Can't wait. I can't wait for more Colin Frey commentary and Steve Hodges. They're my favourite 2 things. Iconic, honestly. I don't think they realise how brilliant they both are. Brian Laws as well. I think he's great as well. So no, so you all do a brilliant job at the BBC. I think it's a credit to you. You're a credit to the city. So
thanks.
Really appreciate it. We really appreciate it. No, you can tell, and you can tell you're all Forest fans. So that's it. It adds a bit more bite to it, I guess. So yeah, no, thank you very much, David. We'll see you in the next one when we'll be talking, hopefully, to an Italian journalist about Dan and Doy. Until next time, come on, you Reds.